Okay, so in this video, we're going to look at walking through the English language paper from 2019, and I've called it Boats because that's what it's about. Um, it's quite a long video, so you might want to kind of pause or kind of, fast forward to the questions that you want to look at. But firstly, we've got our key things there. Now, these are a bit similar to what we've talked about in the revision session. Okay, so in question one, we named 4 things that are true. Okay, so these 8 statements, you pick the correct 4 marks, 2 minutes. Question 2, summarise both the sources. Remember, in question 2, there's no language techniques, but we do have to infer. We focus on the what and not the how. 8 marks, about 10 minutes, both sources. Question 3, language analysis of a single part of a single source. Okay, it's normally about 1 paragraph in length. The extract is, they won't print the extract, you have to find it on your initial insert. Remember methods and layers, 12 marks, 15 minutes. Question 4 is comparison of perspectives then. So this uses both sources, and we do have to have methods in there. It's got to have some analysis, so that's 20 to 25 minutes in total. Then we know that question 5 is writing an article, speech, or a letter. We've talked about Poil style writing, haven't we? So, it's 40 marks, 45 minutes. Remember what we said before, these writing questions on English language, they're your absolute essentials because it's worth half the paper. Okay, so here I've just got the sources. You might pause and have a quick read. I will also put a link in the comments. Okay, current year 11 students in 2025, you've got this paper on Satchel, okay, as part of the inserts booklet. Okay, so question 1 is really simple information retrieval. So basically, my key things for you: read the part of the source really carefully, read those statements. Some of the sentences may be written to catch you out. Shade really clearly for 2 true statements. Okay, so look what I've done here. I've highlighted kind of where exactly it is that I'm looking to take the information from. Now, these statements will be written chronologically, so you start at line 1, go through line 12 and tick them off as you go. Okay, so you might pause it, you might have a quick go at that. Okay, so we know then that the source tells us that it would be dark for under 3 hours. Okay, and it's mentioned in there, and you go through and you would pick the ones that you feel are correct. We're told that he's missing his wife, so it's homesick. Okay, we're told that he was normally rowing the sunrise shift. Okay, it says that at there. And we also know that he talks about how he wishes it was light. Okay, so those are 4 true statements. We also know that there's some in here that are quite tricky. Okay, right at the end, we're told that he sees a blue hue, for example, so there must be some daybreak. Okay, and then some obviously total opposite. Lovely. So we're now on to question 2. So in question 2, we're going to be asked to compare similarities and or differences. Similarities or differences about things in both the sources. It's a specific focus. Really importantly, it doesn't need language analysis or methods, but it does need some inference. Remember, I said to you that you best start with a comparison thesis and then a paragraph about A followed by B, and just remember, infer, compare. Okay, so let's have a look at this. The writers in source A and source B are travelling on different types of boats. Use details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about the different boats. So the first thing that I'm highlighting there is this idea of different boats. So it's the boats that I need to compare, not the journeys, not the people, not where they're going, definitely not what they think about it, but why the boats are different. Okay, lovely. So you might pause the video, you might have a quick go, you might look at your sources, and you might decide what you learn about the boats in both. Okay, so those are some of the things that I've found. Now you'll see my quotations are in black and I've put my quick inference in red. So in A, for example, the boat's brand spanking new and it's bought from race organisers. That tells us that it's bespoke and one of a kind. It's got oars, so it'd be slow, physically demanding to move it. We're told it's our little boat, it's built for 2 people, and we're also told that the boat collapses, aren't we, at the end in the waves, so we know that there's a fragility to it. The boat in B must be big and powerful because it's got engine and timbers, okay. We know that it's long and narrow, we know it's got cabins, and I think that's a really important thing for us. If it's got cabins, we know that it must be for a lot of people, it must be comfortable, it must be luxurious, people must spend the time there, and it's a steamship, so it must be sturdy. Okay, lovely. So those are some more that we did in revision. So in question 2, I'm looking to begin with a key thesis that compares both before looking at both the sources in turn. So I want you to remember, no methods, no analysis, but I do need inference. So I'm going to start my question 2 with a basic thesis. It's a quick comparison, okay, to show that I can compare. And it's just the general things I'm going to talk about. Whereas the boat, notice I'm using the word boat continually, and source A is a racing vehicle built in modern times for a journey that isn't typical, and therefore it's quite a unique boat. The boat in B sounds old, grand, and built for lots of people to take a much more typical journey that isn't meant to break records. So that's how I would open my 8-mark question, okay? A quick comparison with 2, and like I say, look for me at the amount of time that I use the term boat, because that's in the question. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 3 times really clearly, so I know I've got the focus of the question. And listen, there's one of my paragraphs there. Okay, now I want you to note that I never mention the writer within this. It's always focused on the boat. So you might pause it and have a look. Biggest thing I want you to see is that I put my quotations or my references in yellow, and then I have my inference, what that shows about the boat, in green. And there's my second paragraph about the boat in B. Again, we have my quotations in yellow, and then I have the inferences in green. Okay, so again, and you might look at some of the things that I've underlined here, okay, they're comparative phrases, it just keeps me comparing back. So, altogether then, that's my top mark response to question 2. Might pause it, have a quick look. Okay, question 3 then is language analysis, that's the same as on question 2 on paper 1. There we go, there's your question. So you now all need to refer to source A from lines 16 to 26. How does the writer use language to describe the power of the sea? So when I see the word how, I know I've got to have methods, and I know I've got to have analysis. And look, I've highlighted the lines. I would go onto my insert and I would put stars next to where I'm looking. You've got to go from that. And remember, know which source you're looking at. Don't write about source B when it's asking you about source A. Okay, so do that highlighting straight off. There's the extract that you're looking at. Okay, again, you might pause it and have a look. You might think about those questions. Just note that I've said this, if in doubt, look at the verbs. Always a key tip for you. The verbs always give you a lot of meaning. Okay, so I'm planning for a quick thesis and then 2 paragraphs within this. Okay, it's my thesis about the power of the sea. The power of the sea presented as immense, unstoppable, and fearsome. And then I've got my topic sentences that link to that. The sea's a bit villainous, and the writer, through verbs, shows that the sea is actually quite merciless. And remember, in this question, I've got to talk about the impact of these words. What's the effect of them? That's a key thing. Okay, so there's my thesis and my first point. And look, you might pause it and have a look. In yellow, I've highlighted my quotations. In blue, I've highlighted where I talk about methods. And then in green, really importantly, I talk about the impact of methods. So, the world went black. The writer uses monosyllabic, so single syllable language here, to suggest that the sea has the power to make the speaker voiceless and speechless, suggesting the complete power that it seems to possess. So in green, I'm talking about the impact of using monosyllabic language within that quotation in yellow. And that's the key thing that we've got, isn't it? That's our layering. We unpick words, but we think about why it's done. You might have a go at the other paragraph. Okay, we're now on to question 4. So question 4, in this question, like in question 2, it's going to ask us for a bit of comparison. However, you are comparing the methods that create the perspective here. Okay, so remember, as precise as you can. No good, bad, happy, sad, positive, negative. Okay, they're not precise enough. You want to be precise in what the writer thinks. You might pause this and have a look. Okay, just a basic feelings wheel here. And it takes these base feelings to the middle and it gives you more precise synonyms there. And that's good for some of you. Okay, so there's my question. So again, I'm highlighting the key things. Okay, I've got the word how, so I know I've got to talk about methods. I know I'm looking for different perspectives and feelings, and it's about experiences at sea. Okay, so in my plan, I'm looking at different perspectives in each source. Okay, so I've already picked some of the quotations here. Okay, so the ocean had continued to build an ever-increasing wind gusting at 40 knots. And we might think that that shows apprehension or fear fear. I think that's an important quotation. I gasped as my body screamed for air. I'm here, I'm here. And that isn't just being bad, is it? It's desperation, it's being terrified, it's feeling violated by nature, okay? It's panicked and stuff like that. Want to be precise with it. And then in source B, I threw myself into my bunk for a little sleep and I was dropping into a doze. It's quite relaxed, that is. It's quite calm, it's quite serene, okay? A bit of exhaustion in there though. And then the night was black and starless, the water was whiter than milk. We might think about how there's concern within that from the writer, how the writer's perplexed, how there's anxiety, okay? How there's fear. Okay, so this is how I'd structure this question. I'd have a quick thesis that compares the obvious thing in both sources. I would then analyse source A with two key perspectives with my quotations, and analyse source B with two perspectives. Okay, and I'll try and have a quick conclusion at the end. So I'm beginning with my thesis here. Okay, and remember in our thesis we just want to introduce the kind of perspectives or feelings that we'll be talking about. So I start with a discourse marker, whereas. So whereas in source A, the apprehensive, that's a perspective, experience of being at the sea turns into breathless panic. In source B, the writer's experience of being at sea is a serene one that turns perplexing and eerie and anxious for the writer. Okay? And I just want you to remember, look at this point now, we're talking about the writer. We're talking about the writer. Really important. Okay, so there you'll see my opening of my paragraph by source A. Got my thesis here. And then I talk about source A. Now look at the amount of times I use the term the writer. Because this question is asking us about what the writer thinks. So keep using the term the writer. Okay. So in source A, the writer is apprehensive at the start as the ocean began to build, ever increasing wind. The writer implies that the sea, I've made a mistake there, is building, suggestive that his apprehension comes. Look at me layers, okay? I talk about single words and I always link it to, why that is used. Okay, so you'll see there that, there's analysis, but it's always based on what the writer thinks. Okay, so again, you might pause it, you might have a look, and you might see how I've done that there. Okay. And here's one of my paragraphs about source B now. And again, the same kind of thing. Okay, I keep using the term the writer, that's important. I keep mentioning methods and their impact. But I also try and have these comparative phrases, unlike the ominous opening of A, unlike that of Fogel in A, unlike the blind panic of A. Just reminds us that we're doing a bit of comparison. And look, it's always about what the writer thinks. In question 2, the term the writer was banned. In question 4, we want to use it continually. So that's question 4, and this is question 5. So we know question 5 is a bit like a poil structure, okay? Remember, you need to create a voice. So you want to open perhaps with an element of anecdote, okay? Opening with a personal story. You definitely want to be using imagery to really push your argument forward. Remember, you're not arguing both sides. You need to decide what it is that you think in relation to the statement and go with that. But within that, some of you will be thinking about counter arguments, considering what other people think before going on to say why it's wrong. And we try and return to that anecdote at the end in a cyclical structure. So there's a question. You might pause it and you might have a think about what yours would look like. Okay. So it's people who have extraordinary skill, courage and determination who deserve to be famous, not those who have good looks or lots of money or behave badly. Okay, so we have that. And just note for me what the exam board say to you, and it's that. Plan your answer to question 5 before you start to write. Okay, so I've done that based around Poir. So I've decided I'm going to argue that it's right, normal people do deserve more adulation than kind of those who are famous. Because I'm going to describe a firefighter leaving their shift from work. I'm going to focus on the flashing lights that you can see, okay, at the fire station. I'm going to talk about like the black debris on his face, okay, the eyes that are tired, the hands that are shaking. I'm going to talk about how they walk past the public to the bus stop and nobody even looks at them. I'm then going to have this short sentence paragraph, those who do great things are invisible, okay. Then I'm going into my arguments, okay, so I've got to say why. If you remember all the way back to year 9 when we talked about logos, you've got to say why. Because if not, it's not logical and you're also not credible. So I'm saying that people like this firefighter should be given more because they don't deserve to be worried about money. Okay, they help our community, so we should give them recognition. We should give them awards and some that we're thankful because sometimes words go a long way. So I'm giving my reasons within that. In my argue against paragraph, I'm going to talk about what other people seem to think. Some people think that these people have a job they chose and they should just get on with it. Now, obviously, I don't agree with that, so that's where my counter argument comes in. However, I'm going to say, you know what, people who think that, our communities would be destroyed if it wasn't for these people, so they do deserve respect. And that's my counter argument paragraph. And then I have my resolution, don't I? Here's my answer to the problems. So basically pay them more, give a little bit of time to celebrate them, give them security, because then the world gets better. Then really importantly, you lot, I've gone back into my final paragraph here, my link paragraph, okay? And that goes back to that person from the anecdote at the start. So I'm going to go back to that firefighter. But this time it's the end of the shift, and now rather than walking past flashing lights and nobody talking to them, they're walking past cards on the wall on the way to the car park. I'm going to describe how people smile at them and tell them they're appreciated. Talk about how a little bit goes a long way. Okay, so there's my opening of a letter. Okay, look how I've started with a short sentence. I've used a colon to precede a question. We know that kind of vocabulary, sentences, punctuation and imagery are really important. Okay, let's have a look. I've got a dash there. Okay, I've got a fronted adverbial by comma sentence there. Okay, I have got suckling like guilt, so I've got a bit of a simile. There's my dead short paragraph. Me, what's the problem? Most people will get it from the anecdote, but I've made it clear here. You know, we should open our eyes to people who do good things, okay, and we should be blind to other people who are just famous. Look how I've got a link in my language here, okay, open our eyes and blindness, bit of a motif going there. So I know I have to say why. Here's my argument paragraph. Okay, look at how I use questions and then answers hyperphora. Look how I'm using my dashes again. Look how I use pronouns like us. Okay, it's all important. Look how I've got a list there. Shows I've got a bit of sentence construction. Look how I've got longer but then shorter sentences like that. There's my counter argument. You'll see me counter argument in red and then I go on. Okay, the most important word you lot in this is however. So if I didn't have my discourse marker, my conjunction there, however, it wouldn't be a counter argument. Okay, so that's really important. I speak to my audience there in the letter. Okay, we need a solution. Remember, verbs go a long way, and that's important there. And then we go back to the anecdote at the end. All right, so we're going to go back to that firefighter. The smoke's faded from the skin, but this time they walk past the cards, the notes, we appreciate you, and look how I've ended with a real hard statement. You know, we will build a better, kinder Britain. All right, so that's Poir writing. That's paper 2, 2019 boats. Okay, have a look at it in your revision.